student to this massive open online course. I am going to discuss 3 stages of demographic transition. However, whether we can say it 3 stages or not, that we will come to know at the end of the discussion. After completion of the module, you will be able to understand several things like the importance to study demography, what is demography, the theory of demographic transition, quantitative differential in the population growth in different countries. Coming to the point to the importance of demography, it is very important to study the size of the population, or more specifically human population at any point of time for any country. This is so because human resources are very important from the point of view of the economics. It is not only an important factors of production but also ends in the production process. So from point of view of economics, it is very important to know in quantitative terms the size of the population, the composition of the population, the distribution of the population, and its interaction with the social development, the economic development, and other factors. So, study of demography is important from the point of view of economics. At this point, we may conclude that demography is an integral part of economics. But when we discuss the concept of demography or what is demography, then we will understand that demography is an interdisciplinary or a multidisciplinary concept. Now come to the point that what is demography? Demography is a statistical study about the human population. It involves the discussion of variety of variables related to population like size, growth rate, composition, changing over time, spatial effect, intertemporal effects on population. A borderline study is more interesting concerning demography because it discusses the interaction between the policy changes. Policy changes means changes in the policy of economic, social changes with that of the human population change. And in the borderline study, we also study the effect of economic policy change, social policy change, culture on population size or on demography. In that sense, it is multidisciplinary. It is not only an integral part of economics, but also a part of sociology and most importantly, anthropology. Now we come to our main discussion part, that is the stages of demographic transition. At the beginning, I mentioned that whether we can say there are 3 stages of demographic transition or some more, that we are going to discuss right now. Now, what are the stages of demographic transition, or what is the theory of demographic transition? Well, theory of demographic transition postulates a sequence of death and birth rate discussion. That is, in this section, we will only concentrate on 2 factors, birth rate and death rate, and concerning the changes in the fertility rate, population size, etc. So, 2 important factors. There are 3 factors which actually contribute to the population growth. First one is the birth rate, second one is the death rate, and third most important is the migration. So in demography, particularly in the theory of demographic transition, we do not involve migration. However, migration is also an integral part of discussion of demography. Question is who first developed this theory? The American demographer Thompson in 1929, developed the theory of demographic transition, and he propounded four stages of demographic transition. However, over time, different school of thoughts came, different demographers contribute, and they concluded that there are only 3 stages of demographic transition, and that is most accepted. However, new school of thought came in 1947 when C.P. Blaker identified that it is not 3 stages, it is 5 stages of demographic transition, and he divided the third stage into 2 more stages. So altogether 5 stages of demographic transition. But in most of the cases, in most of the countries, experience conclude that there are only 3 stages of demographic transition, and these 3 stages changes in terms of defined in terms of the death rate and birth rate, or in terms of the population growth rate. So first stage, we are going to discuss the first stage. Now in the first stage of demographic transition, the death rate is very high. So characteristics of the first stage of demographic transition is the high death rate, and the corresponding economy. Since we are discussing economy, and I have already mentioned that it is integral part of economic, sociology as well as anthropology. But we will concentrate our discussion of the theory of demographic transition in terms of economics point of view, in terms of economic demographer. So according to them, the corresponding economy is a primitive one, that is agricultural based economy or agro based economy. So what are the consequent characteristics of the economy? First of all, the consequent characteristics is that poor diet. Second, primitive sanitation. Thirdly, poor health condition. So all these 3 together, if we club them together, the end result is the high death rate. Since the death rate is high, the population size is going to be reduced. However, that is not the reality in case of first stage of demographic transition. The another important characteristics of the first stage of demographic transition is the high birth rate. Now, why it is birth rate is also high? The another characteristics of that kind of economy is massive illiteracy, early age of marriage, and lack of knowledge or no knowledge about the family planning techniques. So all these, if we club together, the result is the high birth rate. And the important fact is that during this stage, the economy or the family has a strong preference over large family size. Again, the problem is large family size, the preference of having large children. Since the economy is a primitive one, agricultural based one, the agricultural economy or agricultural labor are most of the family labor. So larger the family, larger will be the family labor, it will be easier to cultivate easily. So by that way, the family size increases. So the first stage of demographic transition is identified as a stage of high birth rate coupled with a stage of high death rate. So what is the consequence of these 2 factors on the population growth? Well, the population growth is not much more, or population is not going to show much more population growth rate. The growth rate is low. The high birth rate coupled with high death rate matched with each other, and population growth rate is low. However, there is a potential to have a high growth rate of the population. So in one line, if we want to discuss what kind of the population structure or what will be the characteristics in the first stage of demographic transition, we can say that it is a stage where there is a greater propensity, where there is a greater potential for high population growth, but actually or in reality we are getting low population growth. Now we come to the second stage of demographic transition. The economy has changed, the economy has improved, and the economy has developed. Now the first effect of the development on the economy is the increase in the income, not the social sector. First it is the growth rate increase, and the implication of the high growth rate is the increase in the income, not the education, not the other. So increase in income enable the people to have good food. So diet improved. People generally properly intake food. First thing. Second important factor is the proper sanitization. In earlier stage, what we observed, that primitive sanitization. Here sanitization is improved. Third, the health condition also improved in terms of availability of proper health care. So if we club them together, the resultant is the reduction in the death rate. So death rate reduced in the second stage, or the second stage can be characterized as a lower death rate. However, there is no checking of the birth rate. Birth rate continues to increase with the same objective, with the same preference of having larger family. So children are here also considered as social security as well as old age security for the parents. Having larger children mean larger income hands for the parents. Having larger children mean large likelihood of surviving children at the old age is more, and even if some of the children migrate to other areas in search of livelihood, at least one of them will be there to take care of them at the old age. So because of this, the birth rate still remains high. It is not like that family planning program not initiated during this stage. It initiated, but it will not be successful because the preference of the general people are towards the large family. So birth rate will be high. If we club these two together, or if we sum them together, what is the characteristics? First is the death rate is low. Second is birth rate is high. So population will grow. Definitely population will grow, and the growth rate of population in some of the cases are too high that results in population explosion. So if population explosion, India experienced population explosion, so if population explosion occurs, it will occur in the second stage, because whatever potential we observed in the first stage, now it becomes reality in the second stage. So what we can say about the second stage of demographic transition, we can say that the first stage potential growth in the population is realized in this stage. So first stage was characterized as it is the stage of high potential for population growth. However, the reality or the actual population growth rate was low. And the second stage, what is the characteristics? That the potential for the high population growth rate is realized in the second stage, and in some of the countries' cases it results in population explosion. It results in massive growth rate of population. And in the second stage, countries, irrespective of its economic status, developed country, developing country, high income country, low income country, every country implemented family planning program to check the population growth, and we get the fruit or the result in the third stage of demographic transition. Now third stage means economic development happened. So first stage was we have primitive type of agricultural based economy. Second stage, economic growth process initiated so that income has increased. And third stage is characterized economically industrial economy. So industrialization occurred during the third stage. Industrialization means that most of the heavy and core industries clubbed in, concentrated in the urban areas. So proportion of the population increased in urban areas, that is urbanization occurred. Now you must have question in your mind that why urbanization occurs, why proportion of the population living in urban areas increased. The answer is migration. In search of better livelihood, in search of better job, in search of new job, people migrate from rural areas to urban areas, and people used to live in urban areas. So the proportion of the population living in urban areas increased. Urbanization occurs. You know, urbanization is the index for industrial development. So how far economy is successful in implementing the industrialization can be viewed or can be proxied by urbanization. So urbanization occurred during the third stage. And another important characteristics of the third stage is that the participation of women in the workforce. So participation of women in the workforce. So women gained education, women gained skilled, and they participate in the workforce, particularly who are living in the urban areas. So for them to gain education, to gain skill, or to participate in the workforce become easier if they have a small family. So now the small family, 2 children norms or small family preference appeared. People prefer to have a small family. It's a change in the motivation because increase in their economic activity, because possibility or the likelihood of the woman to participate in the workforce now increased. So these actually it is a, there is a harsh truth, and in the line of the demographers we can say that the harsh truth is that with urbanization children became costlier. Children are no more asset, but in rural area children are considered to be asset. Okay. So in third stage, what we are getting that industrialization are in phase. So industrialization started, and with industrialization, the probability, the likelihood of females' participation in the workforce are increasing, and with increasing females participation of the workforce, their preference towards small family are also increasing. In urban setting than in rural setting, the harsh truth is that children are considered more of a burden than less of an asset, and the death rate during this phase reduced because the improvement in the health facilities, improvement in the diet facilities, improvement in the sanitation, all these causes death rate to reduce. So death rate has reduced, and we have to have a small family in order to maintain the better standard of living, the quality, in order to improve the quality of life. To escalate the quality of life, what the family needs to have a small family. Death rate reduce. To have a small family, birth rate needs to reduce. So third stage is characterized by lower population growth rate. So in sum up, what we can say, the third stage is characterized by low birth rate, low death rate, low fertility rate, low population growth rate, and improvement in the standard of living, and the economy is approaching towards the stability of the population, the stabilization of the population. So what we can say about the 3 stages of demographic transition? In the first stage, the potential for the growth rate is high, however actual growth rate is low, birth rate is high, and death rate is high. In the second stage, birth rate is high, death rate is low, so population growth rate is increasing, and in some cases countries are experiencing population explosion. In the third stage, the birth rate is low, death rate is low, total population growth rate is low, and population is approaching towards the stability. After this, at this point, the demographers divide, and there is a school of thought who the propounder of that thought is C.P. Blaker, who introduced his thinking about the demographic transition in 1947. He divided this third stage into further 2 stages. So he implemented, or he introduced 5 stages of demographic transition. What is the first stage? As usual, the same. High birth rate, high death rate, and the population growth rate is low, because even if there is potential for high population growth rate, that is not realized in these stage. Second stage, high birth rate, low death rate, the potential of the first stage of higher population growth rate realized in the second stage, and in some cases it becomes population explosion. Third stage, low death rate, low birth rate, low population growth rate, and population size stabilize. Fourth stage, according to Blaker, is a stage where the fertility rate declines. Yes, he introduced a new concept of fertility rate, because women are now participating in the workforce, so women are the representative of fertility rate. So women are not willing to have more children. So in that sense, fertility rate declines. It's match with the death rate, and the population growth rate of population is stationary, not stabilize, it is stationary. So population growth rate is now remains same year after year. So population growth rate is now stationary. So how lower fertility rate matched with lower death rate, and population growth rate becomes stationary in the fourth stage of Blaker. What is the fifth stage? The fertility rate or the birth rate falls below the death rate. Conversely, death rate exceeds the birth rate and the population growth rate falls. However, the demographers are with the view that this fourth and fifth stage actually comes in the third stage in the later period of time, because they pointed out population growth rate will stabilize, population size will stabilize over time. Blaker divided them into 2 groups, and recently these 5 stages of population demographic transition becomes more popular than the 3 stages. So that's all about the theories of demographic transition. Next, we want to consider that how this demographic transition appears in different countries all over the world. So under the heading of quantitative population growth differential in different countries, we are going to discuss the experience of different countries in terms of the demographic transition. Economically, we can divide the global countries into 3 categories. First one is the low income countries, second is the middle income countries, and third one is the high income countries. In fact, these low and middle income countries are our main concern concerning the population size all over the world. These 2 countries together contribute 77% of world's population. So these two countries together contributes the almost 70% of the world population. Now concerning the low income countries, they are in the first stage of demographic transition. What are the characteristics? High birth rate, high death rate. There is a potential for population to grow. However, in reality or in actuality, the population growth rate is low. So this is the experience of all the low income countries. Some of the Asian countries, most of the sub-Saharan African countries and the Latin American countries are fall within this category. Now, what about the middle income countries? They are in the second stage. Some of the countries are experiencing a population explosion also. So, high birth rate, low death rate, the potential for high population growth rate of the first period is now realizing in the second period. And the third group of countries, the high income group countries, are in the third stage of the demographic transition, or from Blaker's point of view, some of them are in the fourth stage and in some of them are the fifth stage of demographic transition. Now we will discuss the experience of two most populated countries of the world, China and India. These two countries together contribute 37% of the world's population. So 37% of the world's population are living in these two countries. In fact, the fertility rate is very high for these two countries. During 2001 to 2011, the average fertility rate of these two countries were 2.1%, very high. But China has managed their fertility rate more appropriately than India, because according to United Nations report that China's fertility rate during 2011 was 0.5% and that of India's was 1.6%. So fertility rate is much more higher in India than in China, and as expected, India will cross China within few years. So, and India will become the most populated country in the world. But even if that, we will discuss in some other discussion that India didn't face much more problem because of having larger demographic dividend here. We are at the flag end of our discussion of 3 stages of demographic transition. After discussion, I put this question to all my students that whether we can say it 3 stages or 5 stages, because it is actually 3 stages of demographic transition, but Blaker's identified 2 more stages, and you can appropriately say that the last 2 stages can be divided from the 3rd stage, because stability, how we are getting stability in the population, that is not discussed by that school of thought of demographers who said that there are only 3 stages of population demographic transition. However, Blaker identified that stability comes after stationarity and then by a declining growth rate. Demographic transition is important to know. Important to identify the appropriate stage for a particular country's demographic transition. This is so because you have to have appropriate population policy so that you can utilize your human resources for the development of the economy. Ultimate aim is the development of the economy. Development means growth plus welfare. So ultimate aim is to develop the economy with a social development. Thank you.